Imagine you could sit down with Leonardo da Vinci and ask him one question. What were you thinking? Because when you look at his life, it's hard to believe one person could care about so many things. He was a painter, but he also studied the human body, nature, machines, water, light, and flight. He never seemed happy just looking at something. He wanted to know why it worked the way it did. Most people know him for the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper. But that's only a small piece of the story. Behind those paintings was a man who spent his life asking questions most people never even thought to ask. And sometimes his search for answers was so strange that you have to wonder, was Leonardo simply a genius, or did his mind just work differently from everyone else's? So today, let's put the myths aside and look at the real Leonardo da Vinci. Not the perfect genius from internet videos. Not the man who supposedly invented everything hundreds of years early. The real Leonardo, curious, obsessive, a man who started amazing things and often never finished them. By the end, you can decide for yourself. Let's start with something that says a lot about him. Leonardo wasn't happy just painting the human body. If he wanted to paint someone realistically, he wanted to know what was under the skin. Why did an arm move that way? How did muscles connect to bones? How did the heart work? This curiosity led him to do something very unusual for an artist of his time. He studied human bodies by cutting them open. According to the Royal Collection Trust, Leonardo may have dissected around 30 human bodies, along with animals, producing hundreds of anatomical drawings and thousands of written notes. Think about that. This was Renaissance Italy, not a modern medical school. And Leonardo, an artist, was opening up bodies just to understand what he was looking at. He wasn't trying to become a doctor, he was trying to become a better observer. But his curiosity went far past what he needed for painting. He wanted to understand how the body actually worked. How vision worked, how life itself worked. That's what makes Leonardo different. He didn't just want an answer. He wanted to know how the answer worked. And this followed him everywhere. Take water. Most of us look at a river and just see water moving. Leonardo looked at it and started asking questions. Why does it swirl? Why does it move that way? What happens when it hits something? He filled pages with notes just on water. He did the same with birds. Most people see a bird flying and think, that's a bird flying. Leonardo thought, why can this thing fly? What are the wings actually doing? That curiosity eventually led him to design machines meant to explore human flight. Now here's where we separate the real Leonardo from the exaggerated version online. You've probably heard he invented the helicopter 500 years early. Not quite true. He did design a machine called an aerial screw that looks a bit like later flying machine ideas. But he never built one that worked, and he never flew it. What's impressive is that he was seriously thinking about flight at a time when it was nowhere close to reality. You can see this same restless mind in his notebooks, which are probably the best window into what was going on in his head. Thousands of pages, one has a study of a human skull, the next has a machine, then water, then a bird, then math, then architecture. It's like watching his thoughts jump from one subject to the next. He also often wrote in mirror writing, backwards, only easy to read in a mirror. Some say he was hiding his ideas, others point out he was left-handed. Honestly, we don't have a clear answer, and I think that's fine. Not knowing is part of what makes him interesting. Now here's a part of Leonardo's life people often skip. He had a real problem finishing things. Imagine hiring him to paint something. He starts, then gets curious about anatomy, or light, or facial expressions, and suddenly your painting has become part of a much bigger experiment. Leonardo became famous for leaving works unfinished. Some call it perfectionism. I think it was more that he had trouble stopping his own investigation. One great example is the Virgin of the Rocks. When researchers scanned it with infrared, they found an entirely different, earlier composition hidden underneath. Leonardo had literally painted over his own first plan. That tells you exactly how he worked, experimenting, changing his mind, trying something, deciding it wasn't right, and trying again. You see that same obsession in the Mona Lisa. Leonardo was fascinated by how light hits a face, how expressions work, how the eyes and mouth shape how we read emotion. He used a technique called sfumato, where the transitions between light and shadow are extremely soft, so edges almost melt into each other. That's part of why her expression is so hard to pin down. You think she's smiling, then you're not so sure. Leonardo was interested in exactly that uncertainty, the gap between what we see and what we think we see. That connects to another big piece of his curiosity, vision. How light enters the eye, how perspective changes what we see, how atmosphere changes distant objects. Anatomy helped him understand the body. Optics helped him understand vision. Geometry helped him understand perspective. All of it fed back into his paintings. That's why I don't think you can really separate Leonardo the artist from Leonardo the scientist. For him, art and science were the same search for understanding. But here's something people leave out. He wasn't always right. Some of his scientific ideas were wrong. Some of his machines would never have worked. and that actually makes him more impressive, not less. If he'd known everything already, there'd be nothing interesting about his process. He asked questions, made mistakes, changed his mind, and kept going. That's a far more honest picture of genius. Genius doesn't mean having every answer. Sometimes it just means being willing to spend years chasing one. So, was Leonardo da Vinci insane? Honestly, I don't think we can say that. We don't have the medical information to make any real diagnosis of someone who lived over 500 years ago. And more importantly, being unusual doesn't mean being mentally ill. Writing backwards, studying corpses, leaving paintings unfinished, none of that makes someone insane. It just makes him unusual, and he definitely was. From the outside, jumping from corpses to birds, to machines to water, to painting to math looks chaotic. But maybe it wasn't chaos. Maybe Leonardo simply couldn't stop being curious. Think about how a child behaves. They ask why, you answer, they ask again, and eventually most of us stop asking. Leonardo never really stopped, and he didn't just ask, he actually went and investigated. That's the real difference. Curiosity is easy. Serious investigation takes years, and Leonardo was willing to give it years. That's why his notebooks are so valuable today. They don't just show what he knew, they show what he was trying to figure out, correcting himself, exploring possibilities in real time. Maybe that's why Leonardo still feels modern. Not because he invented every machine we use, he didn't, but because his approach still feels familiar. Observe, ask a question, test it, draw it, change the idea, try again. That's basically the scientific method, hundreds of years early. But there's a downside to having that many questions. You can end up with more curiosity than time. Leonardo couldn't finish every experiment, build every machine, or complete every painting. Maybe that's one of the real tragedies of his life. We remember him as the man who could do everything. The real Leonardo couldn't. He was human, with limits, unfinished ideas, and abandoned projects. But maybe that's exactly why his story hits so hard. He didn't wait until he knew everything to start. He started with questions and spent his life trying to answer them. Looking at the Mona Lisa with that in mind, you start seeing the same curiosity that fills his notebooks. Light, expression, atmosphere, perspective. It's not just a portrait. It's the result of someone who spent years trying to understand exactly what he was looking at. Maybe that's why, 500 years later, we're still staring at it. So, genius or insane? I think the question itself is a bit wrong. Leonardo wasn't some supernatural genius, and there's no good reason to call him insane. He was a human being with an incredible amount of curiosity, talented, obsessive, capable of mistakes, capable of leaving things unfinished. But there's one thing he almost never lost, the desire to understand. When Leonardo looked at the world, he never just accepted what he saw. He wanted to know what was underneath it. And maybe that's the real reason we're still talking about him. Not because he invented everything, not because he knew everything, but because he refused to stop asking questions. And maybe that's what genius really looks like. Not having all the answers, just being curious enough to keep searching for them. So now I want to know what you think. Was Leonardo da Vinci simply a genius, or was his obsession with understanding everything what made him so unusual? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked exploring the strange mind behind some of history's greatest paintings, subscribe to Art Explains. There's a lot more hiding behind the paintings we think we already know. I'll see you in the next one.